In many ways, makers have been around, for a long time, and this is, in some ways, reigniting what you could view as a tradition. But I started Make Magazine in 2005, and began using the word makers as our audience, as people who make things for lots of different reasons, using lots of different technologies and techniques. But in many ways, make was like reinventing popular mechanics for a new age, introducing digital technologies as well. But really kind of a project-oriented magazine about things to do, things to have fun doing. I think the surprising thing about makers is there are really a wide variety of them, and as we've begun to develop this through Maker Faire, we've attracted all kinds of makers, and to some degree, makers can be in robotics and electronics, but they could be carpenters, they could be cooks, they could be in embroidery and textiles. So it's really hard to know how many makers there are worldwide. But I would say that if anybody looked at this, there are far more people engaged as makers today than anybody would ever believe possible. Just to give you an idea, our Bay Area Maker Faire, which was in May, had 120,000 people over 2 days. And these are families and lots of people coming and showing their work, but people experiencing and asking the question, hey, maybe that's something I could do. Well, I think, let me tell you, initially, before Make, I did a series of books called Hacks. And fundamentally around hacks was this idea that you could hack something to make it better, improve it, customize it, change it to make it the way you wanted it to be. Hacker is something that is associated with computers and technology. And these are kind of a group of people that really are clever at doing these things. And I've always been interested in sharing what they know with other people. Sometimes people get confused about the term hacker, meaning cracker and other things like a criminal hacker. But I think of hacking as something we all do. And yet, my first idea really was to create a magazine called Hacks, but in developing it, I came up with Make, and I thought it was a broader invitation for more people. A lot of people don't see themselves as hackers, and I think I can get them to see themselves as makers, and that's the important distinction. But out in the world, we have hacker spaces and maker spaces, and they're really kind of the same thing, just different names. But it says something about the culture of making a bit, that it's open and shared rather than secretive and private, and people do it more in public using the internet today than say off on their own. Yeah, well, I started the Maker Faire about a year after the magazine. And partly through the magazine, I meet incredible people, interesting folks that I thought, well, I'd like to get them together and meet each other. And I began doing that in small ways. And I just came up with the idea of almost reinventing the county fair. But instead of bringing pigs and pies, we'd bring rockets and robots. And again, I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know how many people were out there. But they came. And we had about 20,000 people in our first year, and it's grown, every year. Now we have coming up a New York Maker Faire, which will be in September in New York City, in Queens. But this year, there'll be over almost 100 Maker Fairs around the world. Last Sunday, there's Maker Fairs in Pittsburgh, Orange County, Burlington, Vermont, just in the United States. But we will have the first major Maker Faire in Europe this year, Maker Faire Rome. So it's really spreading. Some of these are self-organized small fairs. The one in Pittsburgh was at a children's museum. But it's an invitation for the community to come out, share what they're making, and find an audience, find other people that share your interests. And really, our goal in all of this is to get you to do something, to enjoy doing it. And you might do it in a family context, you might do it in a social context, and you might do it in simply just a personal context. Well, I think at a broad way, making has resonated in a way that I think we start talking about the maker movement and maker culture. I think there's some kind of transformation going on, and I think it starts with people thinking of themselves as producers, as creators, as makers, not just consumers. Not just what do I buy, but I buy tools to make things. I buy materials to make things, and I'm about shaping the world around me and getting some level of control. I think a lot of us do this as a means of learning, and that's certainly why I connect to makers. I'm interested in learning how to do things, how to make cheese, or how to, build a circuit. I think the two areas that I think making holds a lot of potential and is already showing its influences. One is education. We got all these kids coming to Maker Faire, and they're just lit up. And they want to go home and make things. They want to go to school and make things. And they want to find other places in their community to do that. It's not always available for them. So I've kind of taken on as a mission is how do we get more kids engaged in making? How do we provide maker spaces in schools? How do we provide them access to tools and materials, everything from, Arduinos to, older equipment, but newer equipment like 3D printers. I want them to be able to take an idea and make something real and share it with other people. And that's, in a sense, bringing them to Maker Faire and let them show off their projects. The other area, in addition to education, is innovation. And, innovation is a pretty popular word today. Everybody talks about it. Everybody likes to think they're doing it. There's universities with innovation centers. But where does innovation come from? How does it spark inside a person to begin to innovate and create and make things? Well, I think we found this in the maker community, that people play. They take something and they begin doing something with it and they immerse themselves in it. And out of that, they see opportunities. I'll give you an example just with 3D printers. I don't know exactly why people want a 3D printer, but they want one. And they want to figure out what it's possible to do with a 3D printer that they can't do with other technology. And it excites them to spend a lot of time in figuring that out. And then they begin to see, hey, nobody's doing this, and it needs to be done. I'll do it. And I think I was in Akron last night, and we had about 100 people together, all makers in some ways exploring this territory, and one guy building a company called Tiny Circuits, and to be able to miniaturize some of the Arduino products that are out there and make them really small so that they can go places where another Arduino couldn't. So a lot of creativity, a lot of energy, a lot of community, and I think we're seeing new businesses and new ideas come to light as a result. Well, I think it's a cultural overlap. I mean, it's sort of the center is sort of creativity, and what's really exciting, I think, too often our culture has separated. Here's science and technology, and here's art and crafts. Similarly, we've done here's manual and here's mental, and I think making wants to see these things together. We use our hands and we use our minds. They're not separate. There are people that think through the act of building something. And they're just as smart as people who think abstractly. So, part of that is to reframe what these things are. And in the Maker Faire context, they all belong in the tent. They all belong next to each other, embroidery next to robots. And people can talk about it, and they have the same passion about it, and they have the same respect for each other's work. So we see people using technology to create very expressive things, art and science out of that. But they're also doing practical things that involve art and science and solving real problems for people, like, prosthetics, for instance, of, mechanical or robotic hands to solve a problem where someone's missing a hand. So there's a lot of different ways this can be approached, and I think the key for making is it's inclusive and of all fields, and it's really integrating disciplines, whereas a lot of like academic and commercial things are to separate those things out. Well, what we see in the cities a lot is there's DIY workshops that are a good place to go, going to a maker fair, picking up Make Magazine. We have a lot of projects and things. Most of the people that I know have a way of thinking that they're already started. They're already doing this in some way. They might not have thought that it was making. So sort of realizing, one of the interesting things that I've had when people come up and hear about Make is they tell me about a family member or someone who they really admired who was a maker in their life. So I think that's an important dimension to realize that these people are in your community. So how do you meet them? How do you find them and learn from them? And I think maker spaces, maker fairs are a really good place to do that. But we have a website, makezine.com, where they can go and find information about how to do things, and we publish books and other things. Another interesting dimension that's available in the maker community from us and from others is kits. And kits were a thing that were popular in the 1950s and stuff. And it's sort of a bag of parts and instructions and helps you build something that you might not be able to buy. And that's a great way to get started. Learning to solder, or learning to do breadboarding, learning to build a toy to play with. A really good entry-level places. We have a thing called Maker Shed where we sell kits, and makers are creating lots of kits that we sell as well.